Have you ever asked yourself this question? Why do I keep eating when I'm not even hungry? It's a powerful and uncomfortable question, isn't it? For so many of us, weight loss has always been painted as a math problem. Calories in versus calories out, strict diets, or the latest food trend. But what if I told you that weight loss, lasting weight loss, might not actually be about the food at all? Think about it. We already know what to eat, don't we? We know vegetables are better than chips, water is better than soda, and walking is healthier than sitting all day. But knowledge isn't the problem. The real problem lies in what we turn to food for, and that's where emotional eating steps in. Emotional eating is not about hunger in your stomach, it's about hunger in your heart. It's about filling loneliness, numbing stress, quieting anxiety, or distracting yourself from pain. Food becomes a bandage for feelings we don't want to face. The truth is, diets don't work because diets don't heal the real wound. If you've ever said, tomorrow I'll be good, or this is the last time, and then found yourself back at the fridge late at night, you're not weak. You're human. You're searching for comfort. So, what if instead of asking, what should I eat, we started asking, why am I eating? That's where transformation begins. Weight loss that lasts doesn't start with the plate, it starts with the heart. It starts with noticing the triggers. Are you really hungry or are you lonely? Are you bored or are you avoiding something uncomfortable? The answer to weight loss isn't in the next trendy diet, it's in learning to meet your emotional needs in ways that food never could. What if the next time you reached for food when you weren't hungry, you paused for just a moment and asked yourself, what do I really need right now? Maybe it's rest, maybe it's connection, maybe it's simply allowing yourself to feel a difficult emotion instead of running from it. Food will never fix feelings, but when you start listening to yourself, your real self, you open the door to freedom. Freedom from guilt, freedom from shame, freedom from the cycle of diets and binges. So here's the challenge. Stop blaming food, start listening to your heart, heal the hunger that food cannot satisfy. Because once you do, weight loss stops being a fight and becomes a natural result of living in alignment with who you really are. Remember this, it's not about the food, it's about you. When we talk about weight loss and overeating, one of the most important distinctions that often gets overlooked is the difference between physical hunger and emotional hunger. This difference may sound simple, but it is at the root of why so many people struggle with food, diets, and long-term weight management. As a doctor, I want you to imagine for a moment how your body signals hunger in its natural healthy state. Physical hunger builds gradually. It doesn't strike like a sudden storm. You might feel a slight emptiness in your stomach, maybe a bit of rumbling, and if you wait, it increases slowly over time. It is your body's way of saying, I need fuel. And here's the key. Physical hunger is satisfied with almost any type of food. When you are truly hungry, a simple salad, a piece of fruit, or even a lean protein source will do the job. Once you've eaten enough, the hunger subsides and your body feels nourished. Now compare that to emotional hunger. Emotional hunger doesn't come on slowly. It arrives fast, urgent, and often feels overwhelming. It is less about the body and more about the mind. You may be sitting at work feeling stressed, or at home feeling lonely, or even watching television and suddenly craving something very specific. Not a salad, not a piece of grilled chicken, but ice cream, chips, cookies, or pizza. Emotional hunger almost always calls for comfort foods, those items that we associate with pleasure, soothing, or escape. It has nothing to do with whether your body needs energy. It's about filling a gap in your emotions. The problem is that emotional hunger disguises itself as real hunger, and if you're not paying attention, you may not notice the difference. You might say, I'm starving, when in reality, your stomach is not empty at all. What you are experiencing is a craving driven by your emotional state, not your physical need. This is where the cycle begins. You give in to the craving, you eat the comfort food, you feel a brief sense of relief or pleasure, and then almost immediately, guilt and shame follow. You tell yourself you shouldn't have eaten that. You promise you'll do better tomorrow, and yet the cycle repeats because the true hunger, the emotional hunger, was never addressed. Think about how your body feels when you eat for physical hunger. You feel satisfied, fueled, and able to move on with your day. Think about how you feel after eating for emotional hunger. You often feel heavy, sluggish, guilty, or even more stressed than before. The difference in outcome is profound. Your body knows the truth, it knows the difference, but the mind often confuses the signals. This is why understanding and learning to recognize the difference between the two is so essential. Ask yourself, did my hunger build gradually or did it come on suddenly? Can I be satisfied with a wide variety of foods or do I want only one specific food? Will I feel content once I've eaten or will I still feel a nagging need? These are the diagnostic questions I encourage patients to ask themselves in real time. By practicing this awareness, you begin to separate the physical needs of the body from the emotional needs of the heart. Weight loss is not simply about eating less or choosing better foods, it's about learning to respond to the correct type of hunger. When you honor physical hunger, your body thanks you. When you try to soothe emotional hunger with food, you are using the wrong tool for the job. Over time, this distinction can mean the difference between a frustrating cycle of weight gain and a sustainable, healthy relationship with food. The truth is, your body will always tell you what it needs. The challenge is slowing down enough to listen and having the courage to ask yourself whether the hunger you feel is in your stomach or in your heart. When people talk about eating, they often describe it as a simple act of fueling the body, but in reality, for many, food becomes far more than fuel. Food becomes comfort, a friend in moments of stress, a distraction when life feels overwhelming, or even a reward after a hard day. This is what we call emotional eating, and it is one of the most common, yet least addressed reasons why weight loss efforts so often fail. As a doctor, I want to take you deeper into the psychology of this behavior because once you understand it, you can begin to take back control. From a physiological standpoint, food is designed to provide energy. When you eat, your body breaks down nutrients into glucose, fats, and proteins that fuel every cell, organ, and system. But emotional eating is not about physiology, it is about psychology. It is not your stomach asking for food, it is your brain asking for relief. Food becomes a coping mechanism, a way to temporarily soothe uncomfortable feelings such as sadness, loneliness, boredom, anxiety, or even anger. That is why emotional eating almost always drives you toward high sugar, high fat, high salt foods, the so-called comfort foods. These foods stimulate dopamine and other feel-good chemicals in the brain, giving you a momentary sense of relief or pleasure. The problem, however, is that this relief is fleeting. After the rush comes the crash. Once the last bite is gone, the emotions you are trying to escape are still there, untouched and unresolved. Now, on top of those feelings, you add guilt or shame for eating in a way that you know was not aligned with your health goals. This creates a double burden, the original emotion and the new wave of regret. That cycle is what keeps people stuck, not the food itself, but the way food is being used as medicine for the heart. Imagine someone coming home from work after a stressful day. Instead of addressing the stress directly by resting, talking about it, or finding a healthy outlet, they open a bag of chips and start eating while scrolling on their phone. The crunch of the chips, the salt, the repetitive hand-to-mouth motion all serve as distractions. For a few minutes, the stress feels muted, pushed aside by sensory pleasure. But the underlying problem, the stress from work, is still there and will surface again tomorrow. This is why food as emotional comfort never solves the real issue. It is like putting a small bandage on a deep wound. It may cover it for a moment, but it never heals it. Another layer of this issue is how emotional eating often becomes habitual. Over time, the brain learns that food equals comfort. It forms a pattern. When uncomfortable emotions arise, the automatic response is to seek food. This pattern becomes so ingrained that many people don't even recognize it as emotional eating anymore. It simply feels like part of life. The good news is, once you shine a light on this behavior and call it what it is, you begin to weaken its hold. One of the most effective tools I recommend to patients is pausing. When you feel a sudden strong craving, take a breath and ask yourself, am I physically hungry or am I seeking comfort? If the craving is urgent, specific, and emotional, chances are it's not about your stomach at all. In those moments, it can be powerful to redirect yourself toward another form of comfort, calling a friend, taking a short walk, writing down your thoughts, or even sitting quietly with the emotion and allowing yourself to feel it without judgment. These practices don't always come naturally at first, but with repetition, they begin to retrain the brain to seek healthier forms of relief. Emotional eating is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of unmet emotional needs. The sooner we recognize that truth, the sooner we can stop blaming ourselves for lack of willpower
and instead focus on true healing. Food is nourishment for the body, but it will never nourish the heart. By learning to separate comfort from consumption, you create space for both emotional healing and physical health. When most people think about weight loss, their first instinct is to turn to a diet. Dieting has been marketed for decades as the ultimate solution. Eat less, cut carbs, avoid sugar, follow a strict plan, and the pounds will melt away. On the surface, it makes sense. If overeating causes weight gain, then restricting food should solve the problem. But here is the reality. The majority of diets fail, not because people are weak or lazy, but because diets only address the symptom and not the root cause. As a doctor, I see this pattern every day, and I want you to understand why diets alone cannot deliver lasting results. First, diets work in the short term because they create structure and discipline. They give you a clear set of rules, what to eat, when to eat, and what to avoid. Initially, this can feel empowering, even exciting. You may lose a few pounds in the first few weeks, and that success makes you believe the diet is working. But the body and the brain are more complex than any rigid food plan. Over time, restriction starts to backfire. The body interprets dieting as a form of starvation, and in response, it slows down metabolism to conserve energy. At the same time, hormones such as ghrelin, which stimulate hunger, increase. This creates a powerful biological urge to eat, making it harder and harder to stick to the diet. Now add to this the psychological side. Diets often create an unhealthy relationship with food. Instead of listening to your body's natural signals of hunger and fullness, you listen to external rules written on paper. Food becomes divided into good and bad, and every bite is judged. When you eat a bad food, guilt and shame rush in, leading to an emotional spiral. Many people end up eating even more after breaking a diet rule, saying to themselves, "I've already failed, so what's the point?" This all or nothing mindset is one of the main reasons people yo-yo diet, losing weight temporarily, regaining it, and then starting the cycle all over again. The deeper truth is that diets completely ignore emotional eating. You can put someone on the strictest plan, but if that person is eating to cope with loneliness, stress, or sadness, no amount of food restriction will address that need. You can remove the sugar from the house, but the emotional hunger remains. Eventually, when the stress becomes overwhelming or the loneliness feels too heavy, the diet rules collapse. Food sneaks back in, not because of lack of knowledge, but because the real problem, the emotional driver, was never touched. Another problem with diets is sustainability. No one can live forever on cabbage soup, protein shakes, or extreme calorie restriction. Life is full of birthdays, holidays, social events, and moments when food is part of connection and joy. A diet that is too rigid isolates people from these experiences, making them feel deprived and resentful. The more deprived you feel, the stronger the cravings become, and the harder it is to resist. This is why most people eventually abandon diets, not because they didn't try hard enough, but because the plan was never realistic for real life. I want to emphasize that the failure of diets is not a personal failure. It is a design failure. Diets were never meant to address the complex interplay of biology, psychology, and emotion that drives eating behavior. They offer a temporary solution to a deeper problem. Lasting change requires looking beyond the plate and into the heart. It requires asking why you are eating, not just what you are eating. It requires healing the emotional wounds that food has been covering for years. When patients come to me after years of failed diets, I tell them this: stop blaming yourself. Your body isn't broken. Your willpower isn't weak. You've just been given the wrong tool for the wrong job. A diet can't heal loneliness. A calorie count can't erase stress. Restriction won't teach you how to sit with sadness. Until those needs are addressed, food will continue to play the role of emotional comfort, no matter how strict the diet. The path forward isn't about finding the perfect diet. It's about breaking the cycle of restriction and guilt, and learning to care for yourself in ways that food never could. That is how real sustainable weight loss happens, not through punishment, but through healing. When most people approach weight loss, the first question they ask themselves is, what should I eat? They search for the right foods, the perfect balance of protein and carbohydrates, the cleanest meal plan, or the latest superfood trend. And while nutrition certainly matters, this question alone keeps people trapped in the surface layer of the problem. The truth is, the more powerful and transformative question is not what to eat, but why am I eating right now? This shift in focus opens an entirely different door, one that leads to awareness, healing, and lasting results. Let's think about it from a medical perspective. Your body is designed with intricate signals that regulate hunger and satiety. Hormones such as ghrelin and leptin communicate with your brain to tell you when to eat and when to stop. In a healthy state, the system works beautifully. You eat when you're hungry, stop when you're satisfied, and your weight remains stable. But for many people, this natural feedback loop is overridden by emotional and psychological factors. Stress, boredom, sadness, and even habit can trigger eating when the body does not need food. This is where the question, why am I eating, becomes critical. It forces you to pause and check whether your hunger is physical or emotional. When you ask, "What should I eat?" you're operating on autopilot, scanning for external answers. You might flip through a diet book, scroll through social media, or recall the latest health advice you read online. But none of those sources know what's happening in your body or your mind in that moment. Only you can know whether the hunger you feel is a genuine need for nourishment or a disguised attempt to soothe an emotion. By asking, "Why am I eating?" you interrupt the autopilot response. You create space between the craving and the actions, space where you can make a conscious choice instead of a reflexive one. Here's a scenario I often share with patients. Imagine you've just had dinner, a full plate of nourishing food, yet an hour later you find yourself standing in front of the refrigerator looking for something sweet. If you ask, "What should I eat?" you'll probably reach for ice cream or cookies because that's what you crave. But if you pause and ask, "Why am I eating?" the answer may be very different. Maybe you're tired and craving sugar for quick energy. Maybe you're feeling restless and want a distraction. Maybe you're lonely and food feels like company. None of these needs can actually be satisfied by more food. What you need is sleep, relaxation, connection, or emotional support. By naming the why, you prevent food from becoming a substitute for something it can never fix. This practice takes honesty and patience. In the beginning, it may feel uncomfortable to admit that you are eating for reasons other than hunger. But awareness is the first step toward change. Once you understand your patterns, you can begin to respond differently. Instead of reaching for a snack, you can try calling a friend, journaling, walking outside, or simply sitting with the emotion for a few minutes. These are healthier ways of addressing the real need, and over time they weaken the grip of emotional eating. Another important point is that asking, "Why am I eating?" also helps rebuild trust with your body. Diets often teach people to ignore their natural hunger cues and follow rigid external rules. This erodes the body's ability to self-regulate. By tuning back in and asking the deeper question, you reconnect with the wisdom of your own body. You learn to differentiate between genuine hunger and emotional craving. That awareness restores balance and frees you from constant reliance on diet rules. So the next time you feel the urge to eat, take a breath and pause. Instead of immediately reaching for food, ask yourself gently but honestly, "Why am I eating right now? Am I hungry in my stomach, or am I hungry in my heart?" That single question, repeated consistently, can transform your relationship with food. It shifts the focus from control and restriction to curiosity and compassion. And in that shift lies the foundation for true lasting weight loss, because it's no longer about managing food, it's about understanding yourself. True and lasting weight loss is often thought of as a matter of calories, diets, and exercise, but the reality is far more complex. At the core, sustainable change comes not from obsessing over food choices, but from healing the emotional struggles that drive unhealthy eating in the first place. Food, while essential, can never mend feelings of loneliness, stress, or pain, yet for so many people, food has become the first response to every emotion, both positive and negative. When you begin to understand this, you realize that true transformation begins not on the plate, but in the heart. As a doctor, I see the same cycle repeat itself with patients again and again. They commit to a strict eating plan, see some progress, but then life intervenes. Stress at work builds, family issues surface, or an unexpected hardship arises, and suddenly food becomes a refuge once more. It isn't because they lack discipline or willpower, it's because the underlying emotional hunger was never addressed. Unless we tackle this root cause, no diet will ever last. Food can fill a stomach, but it cannot fill an emotional void. Healing emotional hunger requires a deeper level of self-awareness. You must begin to notice the patterns that connect your emotions with your eating habits. Do you crave sweets when you're anxious? Do you snack late at night when you feel lonely? Do you overeat at social gatherings to calm social discomfort? These patterns are important clues. Once you recognize them, you can start to separate the act of eating for nourishment from the act of eating for comfort. This recognition alone is liberating because it allows you to stop blaming yourself and instead understand that your eating is tied to emotional needs that deserve attention in healthier ways. Over time, when people learn to meet their emotional needs directly, something powerful happens. Food loses its control. Imagine a stressful day at work. Instead of numbing the stress with a bag of chips, you pause, breathe, and choose to go for a short walk or call a supportive friend. That act directly addresses the emotion at hand, stress or loneliness, without turning food into a crutch. The more you practice this, the more you retrain your brain to find comfort in healthier, sustainable ways. The result is not only emotional relief, but also physical freedom. You begin to eat more naturally in response to genuine hunger, rather than cravings triggered by emotion. Guilt and shame around food decrease because you are no longer stuck in the cycle of restriction, indulgence, and regret. Instead, eating becomes what it was always meant to be, an act of nourishment and care for the body. Weight loss then emerges as a natural byproduct, not of willpower or control, but of alignment between your physical and emotional needs. It is important to remember that this process takes time. Emotional habits are deeply ingrained, often formed over years or even decades, but with patience and practice, healing is absolutely possible. Each time you ask yourself, what do I really need right now? Instead of automatically reaching for food, you take a step toward freedom. Some days you may still fall back into old patterns, and that is normal. The key is not perfection, but persistence. Every effort to listen to your heart rather than silence it with food is progress. In the end, lasting weight loss is not about punishing yourself with diets or exercising to exhaustion. It is about building a compassionate relationship with yourself. It is about healing the parts of you that are hurting so food no longer has to play the role of comfort. When your emotional world is cared for, your eating naturally balances, your body finds its rhythm, and weight loss becomes less of a battle and more of a byproduct of overall well-being. That is why I say true weight loss begins in the heart, not on the plate. Healing emotional needs without food is the cornerstone of breaking free from the cycle of emotional eating. For many people, food has become the automatic response to stress, sadness, boredom, or loneliness. It is fast, accessible, and temporarily effective at soothing discomfort. But as we know, that comfort fades quickly, and the deeper need remains unmet. The key to lasting weight loss and emotional health is learning to recognize those moments when you're turning to food for reasons beyond hunger, and then developing healthier ways to meet those needs. As a doctor, I explain to patients that emotional eating is not about weakness or lack of willpower. It is about using the wrong tool for the job. Imagine trying to fix a leaky pipe with a roll of tape. It might hold for a moment, but it is not a real solution. In the same way, food can hold back uncomfortable feelings for a short while, but it can never truly resolve them. To heal, you must identify the real need hiding underneath the craving. Let's take stress, for example. Stress often triggers cravings for high sugar or high-fat foods because the brain is seeking quick relief. But what the body truly needs in that moment is relaxation, rest, or movement to discharge tension. A short walk, deep breathing exercises, or even 5 minutes of mindfulness meditation can do far more for your stress than a handful of chips ever could. When you learn to pause and give your body what it actually needs, you not only reduce stress but also break the link between stress and overeating. Another common trigger is loneliness. Many people use food as a substitute for connection. Eating provides a sense of comfort and distraction, but it cannot replace human interaction. If loneliness is the underlying emotion, the healthier solution is to reach out to someone you trust. A phone call, a video chat, or even joining a supportive group can give you the sense of connection that food simply cannot provide. By making this shift, you honor the real need, companionship, without falling into the cycle of guilt that follows emotional eating. Boredom is another powerful driver. When the mind is unstimulated, it often turns to food as entertainment. But boredom is not true hunger. It is a signal that you need engagement, creativity, or purpose. Instead of snacking, try doing an activity that stimulates your mind or body. Reading, drawing, gardening, or even reorganizing a space in your home. By responding to boredom with action, you fill the empty space in your day with meaning instead of calories. One of the most practical strategies I recommend is creating an emotional toolbox. This is a list of activities and coping mechanisms you can turn to when you feel the urge to eat without physical hunger. It may include things like journaling, stretching, listening to music, or practicing gratitude. The key is to prepare this toolbox ahead of time, so that when emotions hit, you have healthier options within reach. Just as you stock your pantry with nourishing foods, you must stock your mind with nourishing coping strategies. Healing emotional needs also requires self-compassion. Many people approach weight loss with harsh self-criticism, believing they must punish themselves into change. But shame only fuels emotional eating because it deepens the very pain you're trying to numb. Instead, approach yourself with kindness. When you slip, ask what you were feeling, not what you did wrong. Each moment of awareness is progress. Each time you choose a healthier response, you strengthen new neural pathways in your brain that support long-term change. Ultimately, meeting emotional needs without food is about honoring the truth of what your body and mind are asking for. Food can never provide rest, connection, or meaning. Only you can. And when you begin to respond to your emotions directly instead of masking them with eating, you step into a place of freedom. Food returns to its rightful place as nourishment, not comfort, and your emotional life becomes fuller and healthier. This shift is where lasting weight loss begins, not in the diet plan, but in learning how to give yourself what you truly need.